January, February of 2020, the dynamic of having to serve families many of whom had not seen their loved ones in weeks and not been able to touch them, I think added a level of pain, both emotionally and physically, I think. We had families, for example, that one family, both the mother and father had died in a matter of days, and their son had not been able to see either of them. So it was a very stressful time, primarily for the families. We handled it because in funeral service and in funeral school, you're taught that each family must be given your undivided attention, and then you move on to the next. But it was very difficult because there was also, CDC was not clear on whether they should touch them even after death. So that became a real problem as well. We took a number of COVID cases, and we told the family you could view from a distance, but you could not touch. And that was, mourning is designed to allow people to get rid of their grief. I think the mourning without touching added an extra level of grief.
Well, I never changed from my norm. I still give it the same. It may be limited, but people think it's still great because everything to me is a celebration. I tell them when I walk into the chapel, into the church, they say, let's give God a hand clap of praise, because we ought to praise God for just being able to come here to help celebrate the person's life and being here to show comfort to this family. We ought to give God praise for being able to do that, because He didn't have to do it. We sitting here now.
So COVID's volume, as time went on, March was not much. April was a little bit more. May started, the needles were moving, and especially in the West, things were migrating this way. We got to June, and our governor shut down the state for a second time and said, listen, this is just, the end of May, it was like, this is just getting out of hand. We got to get a grip on this thing. The hospitals were full. Everything was just snowballing. And then October came, and I've never seen an elevation from October, November, December, January, February, March. That stretch of 6 months or whatever, I don't know what it was. Every month our volume went up and up and up and up, to the point of we just had no idea what to do. We were serving double our families. Every day it was just this turnover. This many would go, but this many more would come. And it was just to the point where we didn't really, I've been at this is 40 years, and I've never seen anything like it. I don't ever want to see it again, to be honest.
The other thing is being there before they die, is that you feel that you've given them a sense of comfort.
Yeah.
And you also understand the transition from life to death. Everybody who has someone who dies in the home and are able to be with them always says, I'm happy mom or dad is out of pain, and I'm glad I was here to hold his hand.
I started my residency like 2 to 3 weeks before COVID hit New York City. So I didn't really get a chance to learn the practice of funeral directing normally. I got thrown into the water head first, and then all of a sudden the water was like a pit of fire.
In funeral service, people used to say, well, funeral service is going to go out of business. I don't think so. It is a 60,000-year-old profession, okay? The ancient Egyptians were the first real embalmers, they embalmed with by mummification, which was really salting the body with bitumen. So that's why you can dig up ancient Greek, ancient Egyptian graves and find bodies and tell whether they're male, female, whether they got hit in or hit in the head is how they died, or whether they died of some disease. And the concept of grieving the dead is so essential to going forward, I think. If you don't grieve for the person you've lost and who's died, you get stuck. And I think there are a lot of people who, because of COVID, are going to be stuck for a long time.
Funeral service as a whole, we haven't turned into that transactional society as it relates to when someone dies. We just haven't. There's a percent of the population that is and will. I might not live to see the end of that, but the story is, I really believe that funeral service is a fundamental need. If you take care of your community in the right way, they'll take care of you back.
Well, I think the funeral service in itself is going to be a mass change in the funeral service itself, because of the fact that people see, and younger people see, that why put so much money into burying someone when you can just go ahead and cremate someone, and you take that money and do what you need to do to build something in memory of, or open a business up in memory of your loved one, or whatever, okay? Because young people are not going to no grave after somebody died. They're not going back to look at nobody, nor take no flowers out to them. Let's be real about it. So they're going to look at spending X sum of dollars, $20,000 to have a service. Well, your cost of service is, and it's going to dictate how you do it, okay? And your professional service fee is what you're all about doing. Yeah. That's what you should be thinking. You pay me for a service, okay?
Exactly.
And the thing about it is, how you get paid by service, by providing service. And the more you provide service, the more people are going to come to you for the part of providing that service. Because it's several different ways that you handle cremation and have a service. So you have a funeral service, and then you have a cremation afterwards. Because we have them from all the type of, they'll tell us, well, what we want to do, we want to put mama in the carriage and take her from here back to a house, and from the house back to the funeral home, and then you can go ahead and cremate after that. A lot of families come in with these innovative ideas themselves how they want to do it, because they want to leave a lasting impression that mama lived and now she did. Even if they have to cremate her, they still want to have a cremation with services, and then be able to celebrate that.
We are an absolute enigma here in this market. Maricopa County that we sit in Phoenix, Arizona, the cremation percentage on a normal, typical year is almost about 70% of the people cremate here. It's fairly high, okay? We prepared more bodies than we've ever prepared. We were embalming morning, noon, and night as far as to get bodies prepared where they could be viewed and so on. And the capacity as far as where we shut down a part of the building and reprocessed it to basically be a holding area for people that were embalmed and able to be kept, because we had nowhere to put people. We really were out of space. We've transformed our model a number of years ago that said, listen, whether they bury the person or cremate the person isn't the objective here. It has nothing to do with how we're going to sustain and be relevant. What we believe is it's the ceremony part. If people always still reverence the dead and remember them in some way, then there's going to be some kind of celebration of life or some memorialization. It doesn't matter where we do it, how we do it, it's the fact that we do it.
How did it feel to be a last responder and have no one really paying much attention?
Yeah, no, it was kind of like disheartening, right? Because it's like, everybody was caring, all these caregivers are doing all this stuff and taking risks and being away from their families. Well, we had no way to be around our families either, right? We couldn't gather, we couldn't whatever, or we couldn't be here to serve the people when they needed us. So we were living that in a very secret, quiet way.
The industry in general, I saw something recently that the mayor's doing a ticker tape parade for first responders. So somebody from New York State funeral director said, "What about the last responders?" It was a very tough time.
Funeral services is never really top of mind, truthfully, in most circumstances. But when tragedies happen, you know, who needs to be called? First responders are always top of mind. God bless them. You know, when you need them, they're there 24/7, right? Doesn't matter where that is. But when someone passes away at 2 in the morning, what do? We get out of bed and we go, right? Sundays, holidays, it doesn't matter. When somebody needs something, you're there. But it's kind of the quiet caregiver. We always say when you walk into that home, you're taking the most prized possession that family has from them. Okay, and that's kind of what we preach and teach.
My intention as a new funeral director was to bring more ritual and more hands-on experiences to families. And that was all thrown for a big whirl when the new rule is no touching, no coming in contact with each other, no spending time in close proximity. I mean, really, all of these things that I had planned on bringing to my practice were taken off the table. And so I had to really quickly come up with new ways to do things.
Every family, almost without exception, said, yes, I want you to, live stream this service. Every family. Everybody's out there, hey, this is here to stay, you got to do that. And I'm not saying it isn't here to stay, but I will fast forward it till today. As more people come to services, which I think is incredibly touching, that people, they still have a need to want to be. It isn't going to go away. We still offer it to every family, but the answer is, no, we don't need to do that. Or yes, we do. We just have a few people out of town to accommodate the stragglers, if you will, versus it was everybody.
We have done it before, doing stream, because people coming from out of town, and we hired people to come in. They said, well, our family back home couldn't come. Can there any way that we can get live stream the funeral service from your location to their homes? And we was able to do it at the time. But I think it's more prevalent now.
Yeah, I had a friend die last year with COVID. It's 56 years I heard her, yeah. I got a call from her friend, a neighbor actually, said her name is Renee. Said Renee's in the hospital, I don't think she's gonna make it. So, and then he called me the next day and said she didn't make it. So I remember I was with another family at the time, actually, planning her sister's service, and I said to her, I have to stop, I can't. I have a friend of 56 years, this horrible disease just took her. She wanted to be cremated, she had made that clear. And we couldn't have a service. No real closure. I got, when we brought her in, of course we had to embalm her, so I spent some time talking with her. I said to her, how the heck, why did you do this? She said, Maria came in and said, are you in there talking to Renee? I said, yes, I am. I'm talking to her. At least I can talk to her, that's part of that I began to experience what families experience. It's a person I'd known 56 years. She and I had been friends since high school, and didn't really feel good about touching her or anything. But I managed to pray over her and say goodbye, at least to the spirit that was lingering about. People said, spirits don't linger. I said, sometimes I think they do for a little while. People think you're crazy. I'm going, no, it's not that. Mm-hmm. Having been around the dead now for so many years, we've also had people who are victims of homicide. Mm-hmm. That spirit is a trouble spirit, especially those who fought. We had a young woman who, in fact, it was in the news. She was a nurse, and she was brutally murdered by a guy she found on one of these social networking things. She was a nurse out in Northland in Long Island. We had her body. And every time I went around her, I could feel the horror. Because she did fight, she fought hard. I could feel that she had.
Nature forbid there is another pandemic or any other kind of disaster that strikes New York City. But if it were to, I feel much more prepared now, both in my ability to communicate with local leaders and media, which was a huge part of what I did, was advocate on behalf of funeral homes and funeral directors. Because, for instance, we couldn't get gloves and PPE because all of our supply chains had been bought out by hospitals, which isn't to say the hospitals didn't need the supplies. However, once somebody dies of COVID, it's no longer their wheelhouse and it's ours, and we were left high and dry. So I feel more confident and able to speak with hospital administrators and assert that, you know, we do need refrigerated trucks because morgues are overcrowded, and that's an unacceptable way for people to be, you know, housed. And these trucks need to have appropriate shelving, and that shelving needs to be manned by enough staff, you know, and the hours need to be all the time. Because I would be at funerals, making arrangements, on the phone, you know, at cemeteries throughout the day. And then if a hospital closed their morgue at 5, there was nothing I could do. And so, you know, families would just be waiting and waiting and waiting for their loved ones to be picked up. I also feel like a lot of funeral homes are, you know, investing in, you know, their staff. I hope that they're investing more in their staff and thinking about mental health as a key part of allowing our industry the chance to flourish, and giving staff who did experience COVID the chance to work through the trauma that this caused a lot of us. I know for myself, I speak to my therapist pretty often. I speak to my colleagues about speaking to my therapist, and I try and make that, you know, really part of my daily conversation, because just like we don't want to keep, you know, the ashes of our loved one in a closet, we also don't want to keep our trauma in a closet, because then it's just an open loop, and we'll continue to travel in that loop until we find, you know, ways to situate it.